write down your values, stick to them, and don't be afraid to invest in yourself and understanding yourself.
Do you enjoy your job? Do you wish parts could be better? Well, Vet Life Reimagined is about broadening our horizons on veterinary medicine, including our careers and lives within it. Our guest today is Erica Emmett, a licensed veterinary technician who has had a wild ride in her career journey. Her mission today is to help people understand and put words to their strengths and values so that they can have the power to create a job and life that allows them to enjoy their work. Erica knows that this process can take work, as it took a lot of work and a supportive community of individuals for her to get there herself. She now lives it through her coaching service, Fire Consulting. This is a fun conversation as Erica shares her beautiful story and mission. So let's get to the conversation with Erica Emmett. When did you know that you wanted to get into veterinary medicine?
So thanks so much for having me, Megan. I have been now 25 years in the industry and not at all where I thought I would be when I was, young and starting out. I did have animals my entire life, always was taking in strays, had a lot of people tell me I should be a veterinarian, but I thought being a lawyer would be way cooler because, I grew up watching LA Law. So I have a political science degree from Illinois Wesleyan. I'm from Illinois. I currently live in Richmond, Virginia. And when I graduated from college, I moved to DC with grandiose ideas of working on Capitol Hill, but they like to have free labor on Capitol Hill. So with student loans, that was not an option. And I did find a job in DC. I was not very good at it, but I think what we'll figure out is that I'm really good at faking it until making it. I think that's a survivor mode in life. And after living in DC for 2 years, I think it was after college, 2 or 3 years, I had the opportunity to move to China, which of course I took. It was right after my 24th birthday. And I thought, from Illinois to DC, China seemed like the logical best step. And while I was over there, I was kind of postponing the idea of law school and was really fortunate enough to take some fantastic trips to places like Australia and Thailand and India and see all of these animals and parks. And that's when I realized. So that was probably, I was probably 24 around, in my 24th year. And I turned to my friend and said, yeah, I don't think I want to go to law school anymore. I think I will work with animals. um, but sometimes things that come out of my mouth don't surprise people, even though I think it will. I was very lucky that I had just adopted two kittens from a subway stop in Beijing, and there was one American veterinarian working in China. So I just called her up and said I would like to work with animals. And luckily for me, her assistant was moving back to the US, and she said, I have the bloodiest surgery possible. It's a mammary tumor removal. I'll let you come and do it with me. And if you can handle it, you're hired. And that was the beginning of my veterinary career. That was in 1999.
So it didn't scare you, the surgery?
It didn't. What I have found is that human blood, my own, my children's, anyone, I'm gone. Like I'm out of the room quickly. But animal blood, guts, all of the body stuff doesn't bother me.
Well, that's good.
That
Um,
probably should have been the clue right there.
there you go, a very fast clue. It is wonderful to bring people into veterinary medicine with such diverse backgrounds, with your experience in policy and politics. I think that's really valuable. So you're coming in with a very unique background and are starting a journey into veterinary medicine. So how did you get from China back, and how did you get more training into your veterinary technician roles?
So I ran the small animal clinic in Beijing for the remainder of my time in China. I was there for 4 years, so for 3 years. And I also was able to work at the Beijing Aquarium with whales and dolphins and sea lions. It was really great. I got to help do some of the training and feed. I was in charge of toys, so I made toys for them and just realized that I loved it. But what I have learned now that, now that I'm a Gallup strengths coach. Learner is in my top 5, so I must continuously learn. And that's when I decided to come back to the US to go to vet tech school. So I moved to Chicago just for about a year and worked as an unlicensed assistant for several months trying to figure out what I wanted to do. But then I went to Ray in Colorado and got certified, became a licensed technician, moved back to Virginia for a job at an equine hospital because I wanted to do large animal. I really liked working at the aquarium. And I grew up with horses, and my best friend had horses. So I moved back to Virginia to be the first head tech at an equine hospital. And I really loved large animal, but I really did not love the paycheck of a large animal technician. And at that time, I was 30 and wasn't looking to have a roommate. So I moved back to small animal medicine and worked as a technician at a private practice for small animal, then moved up to DC for VCA. And it was a manager role because that just felt like the natural progression was to manage a team, and worked at a VCA in DC. That was my last clinical job, was a corporate job, which is funny because my last job before opening fire consulting was a corporate job as well. So
Yeah, I want to come back to the corporate part, but a question popped into my mind. This has come up before on maybe some differences on a global level when it comes to veterinary medicine. Was there anything interesting? Maybe it was there a difference that you observed working in China and then working in the United States? Anything that stands out to you?
our clinic in China was not really a clinic. I am so blessed for the mentor that I had, and I still keep in touch with her. She lives in Annapolis now, but she essentially had a storage closet at the US Embassy. She treated the ambassador's dog. And so, therefore, the ambassador's wife said, let's find this veterinarian a space. And we had a small storage closet that had 2 chairs and an end table. So, we did all of our procedures on the floor. I held up the fluid bag with a coat hanger. So, I learned everything. We had no equipment. So, we could only do procedures that could use injectables. If it was larger, we had to send it to the vet school. So I learned all of my TPRs and everything with my ears and my eyes and my hands, which was pretty amazing. So the first time I used a scaler for a dentist or a dental was very exciting because it wasn't hand scaling. But really the difference was, that Americans and the foreign community there really took care of our pets. And I loved it, right? It was really great. And I had a lot of Chinese friends. And at that time, they didn't really understand either having a pet, or if they did have a pet, feeding them pet food, or even having them live past maybe 4 or 5 years old. That was the average. They just got used to their pets not really being that healthy and they would die at a young age. But then with the intermingling of foreigners and local Chinese, they really started learning about pet care. And I'm sure if you went over now, their pet care is at a much higher standard. But that was very, contrasting to see that and know like what we were doing in our little tiny clinic. That clinic, I believe that's when Revolution came out. So for us, it was a revolution because we didn't really have the ability to do heartworm tests, and to be able to treat heartworm and give it to cats and things. It was pretty exciting.
Man, so you learned scrappy. That's great. That's helpful. I think it makes you more creative and you appreciate more, it sounds like as well. So you're back in the States. The assumption is if I'm going to grow, it's up, right? It's to manage people. So you went that natural path. But from previous conversations, you didn't seem to feel like you were fitting in some of the corporate environments. So do you mind kind of going back to that and elaborating a little bit more on what you were feeling at the time and how you decided to take the next step?
The next step was almost thrust on me again, similar to my last situation where it was me not paying attention to my needs and really just saying like, this is a great job, I'm just going to suck it up my struggles were that, when you have these corporate hospitals, you have a medical director who loves the medicine and wants every patient to get the best medicine. And then you have a practice manager, an office manager who's trying their best for the employees, but you don't have an ownership. And so a lot of times there are these dichotomies of there's medicine and then there's the people, and sometimes training doesn't happen and no one's taking ownership for it because people like to say, like, I just focus on the medicine, or I'm just focusing on the books. A lot of drama and disloyalty and talking about, it's their fault. The front versus back situation was really just horrendous. And for me, I just could not take it anymore. Which, it's funny, as I have these conversations, it reminds me again when we talked the other day, my top 5 strengths. With When I learned about my top 5 strengths, it said I have to be inspired by my work. So now when I go back and tell the backstory, I realize that when I get to the point of not being inspired, I just start to wither a little bit. And the medical director at that hospital was this amazing doctor. She was absolutely wonderful. And she pulled me aside one day, and I thought I was in trouble. And she said, I love you. You're one of the best employees I've ever had. You keep the staff running so well and trained. And I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but I think I might have found you the perfect job. I don't want you to leave, but I want you to be happy. And I don't think you're happy. And so she had just gone on a tour at the Hills Pet Nutrition facility in Kansas. And the manager giving the tour said they had a sales position open in the DC area. And so she put my name forth for that job. And that's how I got into sales.
Oh, wow. That's so wonderful to have a supportive system that is observant and cares about us, and looking at one of her best employees and making the decision to try to help you in your growth instead of trying to save you and keep you to help keeping the clinic running. So I think that is very important to surround ourselves with those types of people. So I'm glad you had that.
And I had it twice, right? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, essentially, that was the second strong, successful female veterinarian that had lifted me up and really guided me to what was needed for me. And so at that point, I realized that this is the path that as women we can all do. We're going to fall down sometimes. We're women, we have emotions, but we can really lift each other up and just empower each other. And maybe getting here today and wanting to be a coach and helping women in their early career or mid career or just teams in general, and especially with the lack of engagement that we have in the industry, knowing where I came from was just strong female veterinarians supporting me to make me better. So I know it exists, and I know that so many people are in this industry because they are like that. So when it gets to the point of being in a situation where it's the complete opposite, bizarro world, I don't know what that reference is from, but I remember it from something like Seinfeld. Or but it's true. Like, I know the genesis of this industry was, at least from my beginning, was women supporting me. So we would just have to get back to it being a supportive environment.
Well, and that's part of your mission now, but I don't want to jump too far ahead because I'm curious, the strong, wonderful leader, female veterinarian, knows you, wants you to be happy and grow. What was it that she saw in this position in Hills that she thought seemed like you?
I think that the fact that when you're in sales, you have to be a people person, you have to be extroverted, you have to not be afraid of being told no. We had a lot of drama in the staff that I managed, and a lot of drama with the front staff that I managed that quite well. And so I think she saw that I probably had thick skin and could handle being told no in sales, but getting out there and being very ambitious and loving veterinary medicine because my clients were veterinarians. So it was still in the industry and it was pet food. So I wish I would have asked her. That's such a good question. And maybe that's a takeaway from this, is that moving forward, when someone sees something in us, maybe we should ask what they see. I think sometimes we're so afraid of taking a compliment that we skirt over that issue.
Yeah. Or maybe you were just so happy to hear how much she cared about you. It's like,
Yes.
and I personally have been in the position where I understand that you are so tired and exhausted on so many dimensions that when someone offers you the life ring or, change, you you don't ask too many questions, you just grab it. I don't know if that was it partly as well, but I definitely when I'm starting to put myself in those shoes, that's kind of what I'm feeling. So,
Yes. I cried on my way to work every day.
oh,
I was so unhappy with that job. I cried. Yeah, she saw the tears as well. And not wanting me to leave the industry, right? And not wanting me to just go to a lateral role. I think maybe she saw all of those things.
yeah, because I think did and maybe it wasn't at this moment in your career, but I think you said your husband even tried to convince you to leave the industry. Is that correct?
Yes, and it was much less of a wanting me to leave the industry because of the industry, and much more wanting me to leave the industry because he saw how unhappy I was at my last couple of jobs and how it just my all of my emotions were wrapped around my job. And I'm so always very envious of people who can go to work and say, this is a job, I'm going to do it. And at the end of the day, I'm done with it, because I just get wrapped around the axle with all of my emotions and all of my being. And so I don't do well with that. And then, obviously I can bring a lot of joy and laughter to a group, but apparently I can really bring it down too. So I have to be aware of our blind spots, Megan.
You know, let's sit in that one because I think this has come up a couple of times in conversations I've had with people even outside of the industry where, talking about being able to turn things on and off. And I can relate that I have had that moment where I'm like, man, I wish I could just turn it off sometimes. And my dad is an example of that. He's a child psychiatrist and he sees some of the craziest situations. And I have several instances asked him, how do you do this every single day? And you're amazing at it. I don't get it. And he's like, well, that's it. When you walk out the door, you're your dad and husband and you have to leave it at work. And I think there's some people who do it super well. And for the people who struggle with that, I think it goes back to what you're saying is being able to reflect on yourself, know thyself, and get feedback, sit with it. And this is when we can start asking ourselves, is there something that I can do a little bit different that will help me enjoy my current position now? Or is there another option that fits me better, allows me to shine and thrive more? So I think it sounds like that's what you were doing as well, is you were find who you were and your strengths and then be able to find where your strengths matched, where you could also meet your values, which like you said, you need to be inspired by your work. I like that. We left off, you work for Hills as a sales, and I'm sure you learn all sorts of people skills in that type of role. So what did you enjoy about that?
That's the first time I took the DISC assessment. And that's one of the things I got certified for with this company, because I took it with Hills and with Zoetis. Hills was great because I had another really great manager and he taught me active listening, which we all think we're really good listeners until you try to do sales or maybe get married. Um, and you miss cues, you miss the sales cue. And that's really when I had to learn to sit down and listen, to respond to what the person was saying versus listening just enough for them to stop talking so that I could interject whatever it was I already knew I was going to say. That's really what I learned at Hills, which was fantastic. And presentation skills, because they made us take an entire week of presentation skill classes where we had to give presentations while being filmed and then watch the film while our classmates gave feedback. So once you go through that class, boy, you can do just about anything in front of a group. So yeah, I loved that job. I loved traveling at the time, and I loved the independence at the time of, setting my own schedule. And I again got on a team with not one but two veterinarians, and they were my regional veterinarians, both women, and they were amazing, and they were polar opposites of each other. So together they were like one superpower woman, and they just were so smart, and they were willing to share everything they knew. They weren't mad that I was younger, or mad, they didn't hold back. There was no drama. It was so honest. And it just reiterated what I always tell women now of all ages, is the importance of finding women that we can trust, and leaning into them and leaning into what they're willing to teach us, and being open to it, right? Not going in and saying, I already know all of this, you don't have to teach me. But really, I didn't know any of it. So it was so exciting to learn from them, and just being vulnerable enough to realize that, sales is hard, but pet food sales wasn't, as hard. I learned a lot harder with Zoetis, with pharmaceuticals. But it was a great introduction into sales, and I just had a really nice team, and I had nice customers. I knew that it was the right next step. Moving from working in a vet clinic to sales, definitely, I knew it was the right choice.
While we're on sales, the skills that you're learning there, and now being a coach, I'm curious, can you combine some of the things you've learned from both? And the reason why I want to ask, is there something you can teach us in the veterinary profession about sales is a dirty feeling word to some people, and yet as human beings we do it all the time. I think we just don't realize that that's what we're doing. So bringing some of these wonderful listening and sales skills to what the veterinary profession might do on a day to day.
I think the active listening is huge, because I remember working in clinic, and a lot of times, we would automatically assume someone couldn't pay a bill because of maybe how they look or what kind of car they drive, but they're saying the cues of that they would do anything, right? So kind of the active listening skills, not assuming that someone is what you think they are. And definitely what I found was, you really start to grow as a person and a salesperson when you move from salesperson to trusted advisor. And that takes longer with different types of clients, right? Or even people. So they see you as a salesperson at the beginning, and you're selling them. Active listening skills improve a little bit. And then they ask you about an issue that has nothing to do with your product, even though you have a deadline and a quota, and you really need to get this client to buy this product. They're talking to you about something that matters to them that has nothing to do with your company, and you take the time to help them. And becoming that trusted advisor, where they know if you're not there in a sales call and they have an issue that has nothing to do with your product, yet they still think of you, and they think, oh, I wonder, let me call Erica, or let me call Megan and just pick her brain on this one and see what she thinks. And then you help them. And it's not for a sale, and it's not to make your brand better or anything. It's really just to offer them a solution. And when you can get to a trusted advisor status and feel good about it, and it feels almost empowering to you, I think that's the servant leadership that we discuss. When I got my master's and I learned that I was a servant leader, that makes sense to me. But again, I have to realize that is also a blind spot of mine, because not everyone is a servant leader, and it doesn't make it right or wrong, whether other people are not. But I think in veterinary medicine, there has to be a basis of servant leadership in every clinic because it is all about the patient and the client who owns the patient and loves the patient. So I had created a servant leadership presentation and was hoping to get some clinics that I was associated with to take on that model. That didn't happen, but I think it would be interesting to do some servant leadership training within veterinary medicine.
Oh, absolutely. So you've mentioned your master's program, and then we've mentioned a couple of times that you're a coach. So what when did the master's program come in, and then when did you decide to really focus on leadership and the assessments like the disc training and strength finders, those kinds of things? What was that process?
I started my master's when I was still at Zoetis. Zoetis has a really amazing, wonderful female CEO. She is outstanding in this industry. And during COVID, she increased some tuition reimbursement benefits. And so that's when I started the program. I left Zoetis before I finished it, but I found a program at Gonzaga University in Washington State on organizational leadership. The program is just amazing. It's a really wonderful program to help us uncover who we are as people and who we are as leaders. And then that helps us take our leadership skills to the next level. So during that program is when I learned about servant leadership. But for me, it just was like a mirror. As soon as I read what servant leadership was, I understood myself. All these little tiles clicked into place because I have been that way my entire life. I just didn't have a name to it. And that, that gets back to the values as well that we discussed. So much of us, we go through life on whether we go on gut instinct or our thoughts, however it is. I'm very much a gut instinct person, but knowing this doesn't feel right, this feels right, I'm going to do this, whatever the steps we take. And then you get to a certain place in life where you have to sit down and kind of name your values. And you think, okay, why didn't I do this when I was in my 20s? And when I speak to young women now earlier in their career, I do often suggest that of sit down and figure out what your own values are and write them down and keep them so that you know where they are. So when you're in a situation that doesn't feel right, you can pull out that piece of paper and say, it's number 3. This is why it doesn't feel right. It's not aligning with this third value of mine. And the reason I got into coaching was because just after I left Zoetis and I got into the talent space and I got some really good experience, there was just a misalignment of values. And again, I wish I could say that I'm so smart and insightful and in tune with myself that I figured it out myself. I did not. It was my husband who was wonderful. He's very supportive, but he also, had a point at one point he said, "Okay, I think we've had enough here. I think we've had enough of you not being inspired by your work, you not being happy. You have all of these skills, you have 25 years of industry experience and knowledge and degrees. So why don't you do what you love to do, which is help people solve problems and help people like their job better and just do that full time." And that's how fire consulting really came about. My husband lit a fire under me of saying like, let's go ahead and try something different.
In the same process of you being able to do what you really love about work, or to love your work, you're helping other people get to the point where they fully love and their work. I mean, who doesn't want to love what they do pretty much all the time? Which in
Right.
veterinary medicine, that is us.
I think it's 1 in 4 employees now say they feel engaged at work.
Man. What's the population? Is that like across the US or vets, or what's the population?
That was a veterinary study, but I'm pretty sure it's across most of the US. I just read a Gallup poll the other day that was, yeah, 1 in 4, 1 in 5 maybe people say that they're engaged at work. And even though my path has been I get disengaged and I move on to something new, that doesn't mean that has to be everyone's path. right? But if you're not engaged at work, we can certainly find or try to uncover why and help you re-engage with yourself, with your team, so that you you are engaged again. The click is the step, the pep in your step is back, right? Because I did an individual coaching session with someone recently who thought they wanted to leave the type of job they were doing. But when we did the strengths coaching, what we actually learned is that there are just some things that was an innate strength of this person was not being utilized in the current job. So we found ways to pull in those strengths and talents to the current job so that it could be more rewarding. And it didn't have to be a change of job. It could just be, let me uncover myself a little bit more. And what's fun is when you can do the individual coaching and then go do the team together and just help each other look across the table at the person that maybe you struggle with at work and figure out why do you struggle. And a lot of times we're much more similar than we're different, but we really want to lean into those differences. So we could either lean into where we're similar or understand the differences and then collaborate more, right? That's where the both the disc and the Gallup strengths coaching are so much fun because you say, okay, you are right. You are detail oriented and she is not. And normally that really bothers you. But guess what? You could help when she needs to get something done that both of your name is on, detail oriented. You take that part. But she likes to talk to people. So let her have that. And then you start relying on each other more instead of being annoyed with each other. Because working at a vet clinic or any job, it's tiring, right? It's taxing, you give it your all. So we've all had jobs that we loved our staff. You can think of them, right? If you think of like your favorite jobs, they come into your brain immediately where you're dancing and having music and you all just work together so well. And then you have the other ones where you cry on your way to work. So, we don't all have the ability to just leave and do another job. So if you're crying on your way to work, perhaps we could make that better.
Yeah. And I want to agree because I have been able to do several different types of assessments, including a strengths finder, including Myers Briggs. We got a little crazy there, but we got to do them as a group, so as a team. And similarly to what you said, we each had a time, especially with the strengths finders and maybe even the Myers Briggs, where we had a person leading us through this activity. And so she met with us individually to go over our results. And then we got together as a group and she showed us all of our strengths kind of put together in this very unique chart where she did exactly what you said. We could see that we had a lot of differences, but it was good because when you have a diverse team, it means that you know where people can go and do certain work and it overlaps so all the work gets done. And we actually even noticed that there was even among our diversity, there was a couple places that were still gaps. And so if you're thinking about, what would be the next step to really make this team work well, it kind of gives you some insight. So I think it's helpful, number one, to understand yourself better. But when you can do those in a team, I think that impact is even greater. And I firmly believe that we, especially veterinarians, we are leaders. I mean, you pop out of vet school and you're a leader, but I think everybody is going to be a leader in some form or fashion. And so I want to go back to that servant leadership because I want to make sure you have the opportunity to really define what that is, even more so maybe what that is to you. So do you mind sharing a little bit more about, because servant leadership is maybe a term that gets thrown out, but I don't know if everybody fully knows what that means. So do you mind defining that?
Yeah, not at all. And I had no idea. When I saw the class on the syllabus, I thought it was a religious class. I'll just put that out there. I saw
Yeah.
servant and I thought religion. And since I have started using the term, I have had people say to me, I don't like that term. It sounds old fashioned. You need to get rid of it. What's the deal with, being a servant? But really, if we can just take away any type of labels or preconceived notion, the idea of servant leadership just means that you lead. If you call yourself a servant leader, I lead with the entire goal of making the people around me stronger and better only in the sense of how they want to be better. Doesn't mean, I'm lifting everyone up. It just means if you want to work on your presentation skills, then that's what we will work on. And if you think that you need to take some finance classes, that's what we will work on. And you empower all of the people around you to be the best version of themselves. And it almost sounds very lofty as I'm saying it. And I can think of so many people in my friend group right now that would listen and say, oh, here she is wanting us to sing Kumbaya again. I've been accused of being a tree hugger. I'm not ashamed. But it truly is just a leadership format or platform of, instead of saying, okay, I'm going to need you all to hit that quota, it's more of how can I empower you as people, team members, to hit the quota by being your best self. And I think the best way to think of it is training and development. If you have a leader who recognizes where you're good and immediately gives you some more responsibility in that task, if you want it, and you feel more engaged, right? You feel more powerful because you have this. If you have somewhere that you need to struggle and you're not asking for help, they find ways to help you with that skill. And I'm thinking, when I was at the VCA and I had no idea what servant leadership was, I had an excellent non licensed technician, they called her, but she was a vet assistant, having a hard time passing her exam. She was so detail oriented. Other people would get mad at her for other reasons. Maybe she didn't work as fast as they wanted to, but she was so detail oriented. I asked her if she wanted to run the kennel. And our kennel went from constant complaints from clients to not getting their medication, not getting their baths, things not getting checked off, leashes getting left behind, to just, people starting to bring us like cookies and so many compliments because every time they picked their dog up from grooming, it was just so smooth. Because I saw that, yes, she struggled with her exam. Maybe she didn't work as fast as other people, but she was so detail oriented and she really wanted more responsibility. And so I think that is a classic way that servant leaders, I could have put her on a PIP or, forced her to sit down and study for the exam and insisted that she work faster. Or I could have seen really where she was strong and empowered her in that section and found somebody else who was better, who could fill the other gaps. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's exactly what you do. You you look at people as individuals, you find their strengths, and you put them in a position that allows them to use those strengths and excel. And
Yes.
that is when everything starts to work like a well-oiled machine, is when everybody is in their position to be the best them. So, I'm just smiling while I'm hearing you say this because I'm like, this is exactly what you do as being a coach. You go to individuals and teams, but you look at individuals to find what they do best. Am I right?
Yes, individualization is my number one strength. And that just means that I really value the diversity and individual traits of every person that I meet. I don't need people to be the same. I really love the differences in people and I remember them. And that helped me in sales tremendously because I could remember, you know, a CSR's son had his first soccer game when I went there 6 months later, and I would ask about the soccer game. But it all does come together. And this is something that I talk about if I talk to young women kind of early in their career, trying to navigate, especially if they're in a male dominated career, which is, write down your values, stick to them, and don't be afraid to invest in yourself and understanding yourself. And if you do the and disc or the strength training and you're in a situation that you feel very disenchanted or unhappy or stressed, you can kind of go back to those and do some exercises of how in the past has this helped me? How does this strength help me? And how can it kind of help me navigate through the situation that I'm dealing with now? And I always tell people just take opportunities. That's my biggest advice to anyone that I meet is you have to be open to opportunities, you have to recognize them, and you have to just take them. And even if opportunities fail, that failure will turn into another opening. There will be struggle and you might be broke and alone and scared, but if you just kind of power through it, knowing what you're good at, you'll get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to kind of come back to your own example is finding the individuals who will be the right support system. And I think it might be a wonderful female veterinarian that you come across, or it could be a coach that you talk to, because I do realize that not everyone may be surrounded by the most supportive people, but they are there. Sometimes it might just take a little extra looking. So I want to thank you for what you do. I loved what you said about that you love the diversity in people, which means that you appreciate each individual for the unique human being that they are. And I know that goes into you have another passion around diversity and inclusion, DEIB. And unfortunately, we don't have enough time to get into that too deeply, but I think that just, what we've talked about already highlights your appreciation for that. And so with that, I'm gonna start our final questions. Unless there anything else you would like to share?
I don't think so. This has been great. And I feel like I've even learned a little bit more about myself or connected some dots, which is always fun.
Self-reflection, it's great. Well, first of all, before we do get to the questions, you know, if somebody wants to love their work or, discover more about themselves, where can they find you and your resources? Where should they go?
I have a website and I tried to make it easy. It's just fireconsultingus.com. And fire is FYR. As you probably saw, the Phoenix is my logo. And that was really just the rebirth of, where I am in my age and my stage of life. I was like, this is my rebirth, Fire Consulting. So they can just go to the website. I'm on LinkedIn all of the time, reach out, send a message, call, text. I am a Gen Xer, but I really like to text.
I'm a millennial, so yes, that's right up my alley. uh, well, thank you so much for what you do, especially for the profession. I know you do other things outside of the profession as well. So, but you do definitely have it sounds like a heart for women and appreciating the strong women in our environment. So, thank you. So, the first question I have for you is: there something that people may get wrong about you?
That is a good question. I guess that makes me feel very vulnerable to admit. I do think that sometimes I give off an impression that I really want things to be about me because I love to tell stories. If I'm at a party, I love to make people laugh. So it seems like I'm trying to kind of steal the attention, but it's the exact opposite. Really, I like people to laugh and come together and have a good time. So sometimes I put myself out there as like the center of attention, but I don't really need that.
Yeah. The second question is: do you have a skill or an interest that maybe not a lot of people know about?
I'm kind of boring, Megan. I'm not gonna lie. I do love to travel. People know that. I exercise a lot. I maybe people don't realize just how much I exercise. People know that I like to exercise, but I'm a little bit of a fanatic. I do like to push myself to the point where sometimes I feel like throwing up at the gym. And I have friends that I try to get to work out with me, and they always politely decline. And I always wondered why until I learned recently that someone asked me if I was okay, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm great." And they're like, "You don't look good." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I just almost killed myself on the stairmaster on purpose." Like, yeah.
Yeah. Love the enthusiasm, but you're right. That might be a little intimidating as a workout partner. Uh, the third thing is, you mentioned travel, so this may be part of it, but do you have something on your bucket list that you would like to do?
Yes. Oh, so I'm turning 50 this December in just a few months. And my plan was to go to Africa and spend my 50th birthday with my husband and one of my really good friends from when I lived in China. But leaving a job and starting a company isn't necessarily the best budget decision to take a trip to Africa. So that's being pushed off probably until next year. So yeah, that definitely is on my bucket list. So it'll have to be my 50th and a half birthday.
There you go. That works. And finally, what is something you are very, very grateful for?
I am grateful for my husband because without him, understanding who I am and really having faith in me to know that I can do this, I wouldn't be here. And I'm really also just as grateful for all of the very strong women that I have either had or still have in my life. And the older I get, the more I hold on to these women. And I just hope that everyone listening, if you're a young woman, especially, or whatever age you are, to just look around. And if you don't have women who support you, find them because they're there. And the world is a better place when we support each other.
Amen.